webinar today. Why do so many people with caring responsibilities feel forced to give up work? Let's listen to Nikki Howard's story. Nikki said, when the call came in to say Mom had had another emergency episode, my employer was concerned. All wasn't well. It had to be another episode in short succession. And I had already spent some time away from the office. Of course, I rushed to her bedside, but in the back of my mind, I knew that I had responsibilities and commitments in the workplace and a contract of employment to adhere to. Nikki is an apprentice training coordinator and functional English tutor. And she's just one of the 3 million people in the UK who combine unpaid caring responsibilities with paid work. With an aging population, a dwindling pension pot, and more workers, the new generation of sandwich carers, which are groups of men and women who have a caring role, looking after multiple relatives, as well as raising a young family. That's because they've left childbearing a bit late in order to excel in their careers and be able to afford having a family. There's a huge number of them, and I think there are about 2.4 million in the UK, approximately at the moment. So this group is tasked with supporting elderly parents alongside their own childcare need. For Nikki, when her mom was diagnosed with motor neuron disease, looking after her was just something she did. But it wasn't until her responsibilities at home began to impose on her professional life that she knew she had to have an awkward conversation with her manager. So there's a lot of emotional turmoil for carers when they get to that stage. However, the truth is that 2 million people in this country have given up work to care for loved ones, and yet just 38% of employers are said to monitor the caring responsibilities of their workforce, according to a joint report from My Family Care, produced by the Employers Network for Equality and Inclusion, ENEI. So that takes us to the Sharon Coleman case, which was highlighted in earlier slides that Sharon put together. I was going to cover that in detail. I'm not sure how many people have heard about this case. Sharon Coleman and Attridge law firm. She worked for a law firm as a legal secretary. And these were her issues at work: branded lazy, because she was wanting flexibility. After maternity leave, she had a son who has cerebral palsy, and his condition meant that anybody working with him has to be resuscitation trained. So Oliver was the first time Sharon became a carer, and had a really tough time with her employer. So she was one of those people who didn't throw in the towel, but decided to resign and sued her employer for constructive dismissal. Even though an out-of-court settlement was reached, she later won, and it was Sharon Coleman case that gave rise to the part of the Equality Act that covered carers, although it's not a total protection. At the time when many people in a caring role would have given up, she fought hard. A UK employment tribunal later referred Sharon's case to the European Court of Justice to clarify European law. In her case, the bottom line of the ruling is that able-bodied people can be covered by the Disability Discrimination Act. if they claim discrimination by association with a disabled person. The Coleman case has had a huge ramification, not just for carers, but for employers connected to people covered by other discrimination legislation, such as sexual orientation, religion, or age. I mean, as we know, for example, if an employer was married to maybe somebody much older and was subjected to jibes about this, they will be protected under the age legislation. And it's the same for, anybody suffering harassment because they were married to a Muslim. But this is the first time this has happened within the disability legislation. It was never there before. That's exactly what Sharon Coleman's case has done for carers. So it makes it important for every employer to tighten up their discrimination and flexible working policies, to make it clear that any behavior, comments, jokes that anybody might find offensive, if they are in a caring role, is captured within the policy. There's also a need for people in HR within our organizations to look at recruitment and other workplace policies to make sure they are not discriminating against staff who have disabled family members or friends, especially when making decisions about flexible working requests. So if carers within our organizations are having to use up their annual leave to meet caring needs all the time, then some things need to be done. Otherwise, they'll have no break for themselves. And this might impact on their general well-being and their performance at work if they have no breaks for themselves. So how can we make change happen? Which is really why we're having this session today. What would real change be like? To look at this area, I would like us to look at one employer's dilemma. If we are being honest, this could potentially face any of us someday, and it shouldn't be an issue, a carer positive. It shouldn't be an issue if a carer positive atmosphere exists within an organization. So here is the dilemma. So I would like everybody to read and think about this dilemma.
Kelechi, shall we read it for colleagues who haven't got the screen?
Oh, of course. So the best candidate for a 40-hour post. So the question is, what if the best candidate for a 40-hour post in Gateshead could only work 20 hours per week, lived in Berwick-upon-Tweed, had 2 frail elderly parents at home who rely a lot on her support or care, have to spend most winters working from home because of her parents' needs? What would you do as an employer? Opt for the second best candidate or make things work for the best candidate? Any contributions? Just have about 2 minutes to go through this.
My geography is not very good. What's the distance between Gateshead and Berwick-on-Tweed?
About 1 hour, I think.
Thank you.
Should I go back to the scenario?
Vicky would like to contribute. Vicky, would you like to unmute and do so?
Hi, is it possible to offer 20 hours to the best candidate and then go to the second best candidate and say, would you like flexi? Would you be interested in 20 hours per week? If we've got a 40-hour post, go for the best one, see whether the second best candidate would like it half time.
That's brilliant, Vicky, and that's actually why we're having this conversation, because chances are that some employers might go, oh, we can't cope with accommodating that. And the carer doesn't even get a chance. But what you've suggested is a possibility. At least you're getting the good side of both worlds. Thank you, Vicky. Any other?
There's nothing in the chat yet.
Right. Okay, I'll move on because I'm conscious the time's moving quicker than I expected. And we still got a few more slides to cover. So the reason I've asked this question is that often we find ourselves in a lot of dilemmas about work, carers, flexible working, and so many different things. And I'm really pleased about that answer from Vicky. And I want us to look at what real change is really about. It's about enabling access to work because it makes business sense. So when people apply to work for us and they are carers, let's enable them because they represent the community we serve, and they will also help us to build our workplace policy around carers. If you don't have carers in the workforce, then it's difficult to know what carers really feel or what being a carer is really like. Real change is also about staying in work. And that's actually making sense of supporting the juggling act, because if it doesn't make sense to support it, then you can't really enable people to be in work. And real change is about not leaving work. It's not about frustrating carers out of work, because if they leave, you have all your experienced staff lost in one go, many years of experience. But if you create an environment that enables them to stay, then it stops your most experienced and skilled staff leaving. So what are the steps towards making the workplace carer positive? The first step is identification. Not many of us have a process for identifying carers in the workplace. I was at a session not long ago. They had just done a staff survey. There was no carer question there. So if you don't know who they are or how many you've got, then it's really difficult to know how many people we are talking of or the implications it has for your workplace. Caring is a reality. It's a 21st century issue. 6,000 people across the country become carers every day, according to Carers UK statistics. The randomness of it makes it scary. It's pot luck. Could be any of us, even me and you on this session at any time. And recently, the CARE Act has offered a little bit of support, not total protection, but it gives carers similar rights as disabled people that they look after, so that services are more streamlined to support them, seamless to support them. When we look at the population, we've been told by 2037 there'll be 9 million carers in this country. And also, it's important as employers and managers to understand that the expectations and demands of caring are quite unpredictable and they can happen at any time. So carers are not to blame for when they happen. And carers have an entitlement by law to juggle work and caring. They also have a right to work, to access education and training, and breaks from caring role. That's all embedded in the CARE Act and was also existing in various other previous legislation which have been around for some time. Just as in asking whether an employee has a disability, it's important that we also ask people whether they have a caring role. when they are applying for a job, all information is confidential. And we can use this data and personal information to anticipate how many people in our new employees, amongst our new employees who are going to be needing support, and making sure our resources to direct them to necessary support are robust enough. Alongside, it's you can implement a dedicated policy around time off for carers. We'll be looking at various options of flexible working as we go along. The reality is, with experts predicting rising numbers in carers in future, it's a fact that employers have to face now rather than waiting until it's too late. Because if you have a plan in place, it ensures your organization is ahead. The challenge for employers and managers in particular is to respond to staff in a fair and flexible and equitable way, just like you would for other employees asking for flexible working who don't have a caring role. And it's about meeting them halfway so that as long as they get that flexible working deal, that they are still able to deliver, supported to deliver on the outcomes related to their job role. HR is no longer about work-based practice where you sit in the office. We need to go out as HR managers to find out what's out there, what's outside the box of traditional services. Do outreach events when carer organizations put up events, or charities who support people with different disease conditions. Is important to attend to see what's on offer for your employees who might fall within the carer category. So the second step is to support access to basic carers' rights. And what are the rights? Needs assessment by the local council. This has been made more robust by the Care Act of 2014. In the past, carers have to ask before they have a needs assessment. But now, before they ask for a carer's assessment, which is a carer's own assessment in their own right as a carer. It's not about assessing them in their capability to care. Needs assessment is for the cared for, which determines what services they could be provided, that could be provided for them. And in providing these services, some of the carers' problems could be alleviated. There's also a right to direct payments that carers can use to purchase services, which is usually accessed by carers. They also have a right to access employment, which is the more reason why the workplace has to be supportive. The third is making change happen. How can we do that? What's our time scheduling like, our work schedule like? Is it strictly 9 to 5? Is there anything we can do to change the way we work? Have we reviewed and updated all our work-life balance policies, maybe based on appeals that people have made that mean that some things have to change if the appeals were won? Are the work-life balance policies implemented uniformly across all the departments at work? Are more people in social services claiming it than our colleagues in engineering who are predominantly male? Do we know the reason for that? Part of change is about making flexible working guidelines clear within policies. let's not just leave it to manager's discretion, because manager's discretion is the carer's worst enemy, because discretion can differ from one person to the other. Sometimes it can't be argued. And the fourth step is about more changes that need to happen. Investing in staff and manager training. What we're doing today is an online training, but nothing stops every organization from having in-house training. A lot of the training we deliver as a carer support agency is free. Introducing technical solution. These days, people can work from home, hot desk, do so many things via Citrix and so many IT setups and software. We need to also push for a change in our workplace culture, doing things out of the ordinary. Somebody told me last month that her employer has just introduced 6 days for all employees for hospital appointments. Looking at it, you'll go, that's like 6 days annual leave. No, it isn't. 6 days is quite a lot, because some hospital appointments only last an hour and some last 2 hours. So if carers have that sort of opportunity and use it in a sensible way, could last for a whole year and gives them a sense of comfort to know that they are not having to come forward every time they need an appointment. So going closely at the legislation side of this, before we do that, the fifth step of making changes, seeing carers as partners. How can we see carers as partners in the workplace? Consultation and engagement is essential, because if we don't ask carers how they feel about the changes we make, it means that they'll be unable to influence policies in a way that it's convenient for the organization to support them. Signposting and enabling, monitoring and measuring outcomes. And these are all based on all aspects of employment. It's important to check how many carers are being retained after the first 3 years, how many carers are being promoted, how many carers are recorded in the sickness, how many carers have high levels of sickness. If you don't measure outcomes in those areas, it's difficult to find out how the workplace is impacting on carer well-being and progress within the workplace. And also providing opportunities to network with other employers. As an employer, you might not know everything that works. Networking, with other employers might give you more ideas about things they are doing well that you might not be doing well. Supervisions, one-to-one. Some carers find this very scary and don't look forward to it. Let it not just be about, how many times they've been off, how many times they've been absent. Let it be about, how are you feeling today? How are things going? Because when you explore a carer's need through supervision, it makes it easier for that carer to be supported.
Kelechi, it's most engaging, your presentation, and I'm sure colleagues agree. We've got another 11 minutes for the scheduled time of the webinar. So I was wondering if you would like to perhaps invite some comments and questions at this stage. And also I would like to remind everyone that the slides as well as the recording will be available on this Equalities Toolkit website, and we can email those to the participants once we upload them with a link.
Yeah, but I can welcome some comments. I've still got a few slides to go through, but that should be fine. I'll try my best.
Thank you. Yeah, Kelechi, you go ahead with the slides and I'll pick up on comments and anything
Right.
as they come in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So looking at the legislation side of things, we've talked about Sharon Coleman, but I need to share some more legislation with you. I won't go into any details. I don't intend to bore you with this, but it's just to give you the raft of legislation that have existed for years with the intention of, creating carer-friendly workplaces, supporting carers who wish to work, but carers still face a lot of disadvantage at work. Probably the biggest milestone was the Equality Act, changing the situation for carers through Sharon Coleman's case. I'm going to look at just one legislation, which is the Work and Families Act of 2006. And these were all the opportunities it provided for carers. Employers are required to enable carers to elect when to take entitled leave, but subject to employers' approval. It also covers issues such as arrangement for compensation in specific cases, when carers are unable to take entitled leave. For example, if they are not able to take leave during a bank holiday, they can always take at any time. That applies to other employees as well. Relate and balance carers' rights within the Act and rights to leave, pay or compensation with contracts or subordinate legislation. Present a complaint to a tribunal if any of the rights within these acts have been turned down. So you would think with a legislation like this existing for nearly, say, 10 years this year, things shouldn't really go horribly wrong, but things have. But what's happened recently is the CARE Act coming into force April of last year. And the role of the CARE Act really is to modernize all the legislation that I've shown you, bringing everything together, just like the Equality Act did for all the legislation around various areas of equality and diversity. And also, it stipulates key areas where support needs to be provided for people that have the cared for and their carers. That's around well-being, prevention, information, and advice. Everybody has an information role to play. If you can't provide signposts or provide the information to enable carers to self-refer. And finally, what the CARE Act has done is to improve several other areas, especially areas previously neglected by other legislation. One of the areas is about, instead of asking for a carer's assessment and be offered, because in the past, you only got it if you asked for it, but now, once identified, you're automatically offered it. Even if the person you are caring for doesn't want it, you are entitled to have an assessment if the person you're caring for doesn't want an assessment of their own. So that takes us on to one of the big hot potatoes in this situation with carers, flexible working. What are the various options? What is it in the first place? Is it an expensive initiative? The straight answer is it isn't. However, unclear discretion is its worst enemy. It requires more courage and enthusiasm to initiate a flexible working practice if it's well understood. And it's also important for each organization or department to test out the type of flexible working that seems most appropriate, because all of them might not work for everyone, but there's always something out there that can work for each person or team. And here are some of the options that are available. We can cover this in detail through handouts. I'll be emailing some handouts to Yaya to upload so that people can see more details of these options. And I've highlighted 0 hours there because people might think, how on earth would you offer 0 hours to anybody? Well, for some carers, that might be the only option as and when needed. But at the end of the day, it's not always about work and earning money. It's about having somewhere to go to have a break from the caring role. A carer-friendly workplace. It's actually a cheap and cheerful deal. It's not an expensive initiative. And it's important that working towards that doesn't become very onerous. All it requires is making the most of your existing policies by ensuring that they are understood and uniformly implemented across board to help balance work and home balance work and home life. In 2013, a government report predicted that providing better support for working carers would save businesses and the economy 1.3 billion each year. So based on the above, would it make business sense to look out for the growing army of carers with clued up managers who understand their needs and how to address this? Well, let's see how simple it is. It's actually as simple as ABC. And the only way you can do that is, again, through information sharing. Let it be noticeable in our information packs, our application packs, all over the notice boards, our plasma screens in reception. Make it comfortable for people to come forward and say, I work for this organization, I'm actually a carer. Recognition of people who are in a caring role. Award events to recognize their contribution to the organization, their vulnerability, recognizing their value to the organization, needs and aspirations, circumstances and the diversity in the various caring roles people have. Even when you have 2 people caring for somebody with dementia, they are not exactly in the same caring role because the personalities are different and the type of dementia might be different. Carer-friendly policies that are enabling, which help identification, promote well-being, monitor well-being, and are consistent across board. Consistency is the word, because that is what causes problems for most carers, that lack of consistency. So as an employer, what are the benefits of all of this? Supporting working carers. The benefits are hundreds of qualified applicants for every job, increase in turnover, profit or output, boost in staff morale, decrease in overtime, absenteeism and presenteeism, reduction in sickness absence and associated costs. People phoning sick when they've had enough, not necessarily because they are physically sick, but whatever is the reason, it still costs the employer some money. Increase in productivity, outcomes and outputs, better support and services for employees and clients through savings. Most experienced staff are being retained. It is an expensive business to recruit and retrain. So what outcomes does this have for employees who are carers? Let's see. They are loyal because if you're an employer supporting them, they wouldn't want to leave you and go and work for somewhere else for another employer who they might not know whether they will receive the same support from. They are committed because they come in, they know they have only a short time before they go home. So they try to do as much as they can. And in the workplace, if the workplace is positive, they are energized, and that being energized allows them to be even more committed. They are productive. Being productive comes with being happy at work. And if they are happy at work, they are able to generate ideas within the organization, and innovative ideas too. And they are associated with high social return. That means,
Kelechi, shall we just bring Andrea in? She's got her hand raised.
Right, yeah? Yeah, go on, Andrea. Is she there?
Mute me. Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right, thanks. Thanks for that, Kelechi. I just wanted to go back just very, very briefly to the Coleman Attridge case. And you were quite right in saying that it was a landmark case and resulted in the concept of discrimination by association being covered by the Equality Act. I just wanted to remind everyone it's not just carer specific, it covers all protected characteristics. So, for example, there was a very high profile case that resulted in an employment tribunal around workplace banter and name calling when a young man, an employee, was called gay, although he wasn't, but he had an LGBT friend. So the concept that although Coleman Attridge precipitated that, it does cover all the wide aspects of the protected characteristics. And I think you've made some really valuable comments around the impact on working carers, and certainly some of the information that you've shared today I wasn't, even in my capacity, wasn't aware of, and I found it useful to know about the carers assessment from a personal level, for my sense. So I just want to say thank you for your contribution today, and just kind of draw everything to a close now, because I'm conscious of time, and if anybody has any sort of final comments, could you share them now, please? And then Kelechi, as she said earlier, will share the slides and contact details, and I'll contact you all individually as well, to give you a bit more background information because of the technical issues earlier, and I couldn't join you, so I will contact you all later if that's okay.
Vicky, I could see that you had your hand raised, so if you'd like to unmute and just say before we wrap up. It is a virtual environment, but it's still a booked space, so we're going to have to leave, otherwise we risk losing the recording, and it is booked for something else from now on. Go on, Vicky.
I just wanted to let you know about something that's opening up in Newcastle today, officially being opened, the Kittiwake Multilingual Library. So there's a space, it's in Old Eldon Square, and books in all languages. Professor David Crystal is coming to open it today at 3 o'clock, I think it is. And they've got a room next door to the library, which can be booked for £5 an hour. They're expecting lots of people who have experienced trauma to be able to use it. So there you go. Happy Thursday. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Kelechi, for your excellent presentation today. Most engaging and lots of useful information. I'm sorry that we have not managed to cover quite everything that you would have liked to. But, you know, with technical glitches and everything, we do always seem to fall a little bit behind. And thank you, Andrea, for managing to join us after all the technical difficulties. Something seriously was